Welcome back to Making Money Matter. My name is Kerry Stevenson. I've asked Bernard Rowe from Ioneer, Managing Director of Ioneer. The ASX code is INR. They have got a project over in the United States, lithium and boron. And there's a lot to talk about here, ladies and gentlemen, because everyone knows lots of lithium projects out there. There's a reason I've asked Bernard to come on board, and that's not just because of the latest news, but it's also, and I don't want to take away all your news coming out at the moment, Bernard, but let's get on to it. Welcome to Making Money Matter. First time on the program.
Thank you very much, Kerry. Yes, it is the first time on the program, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you on the new program.
Thanks, Bernard. Well, let's start off by saying who are Ioneer. I gave them a little tease, but why don't you just give us a brief overview?
Yeah, sure. So Ioneer is listed on the ASX and actually the NASDAQ in the US as well. We have the Rhyolite Ridge Lithium and Boron project, which we own and are operating. It's located in the state of Nevada, about halfway between Reno and Las Vegas. It's a very advanced lithium and boron project, sedimentary type, which I'm sure you'll ask me about later. We finished a feasibility study about 3 years ago now. So, we've come a long way even beyond feasibility. We're ready to commence construction next year. We have 2 of our 3 key permits, and we're on track to be first production from the project in 2026, and we will quadruple the US domestic lithium production when we come on stream.
All right, you just said something a moment ago, sedimentary lithium deposit. Just explain what you mean by that, because most people will go, well, what is a sedimentary deposit?
Yeah, so good question. So really today, the world's lithium comes from 2 very different sources. One of them is a rock type called pegmatite, which is like a granite. It's quite hard, intensive to mine and process it. The other is brines, which are salt water under salt lakes and primarily found in Chile and Argentina. Okay, so they account for almost 100% of the world's lithium today production. Sedimentary are really just sedimentary rocks. So, sandstones, mudstones, claystones, these sort of sedimentary rocks, marls, and some deposits of lithium are found in these sediments, and they are particularly concentrated in the southwest of the United States, particularly in Nevada. And there's really most of them could be described as clay. So sediments are a broad word. Clay is a much more specific term for a rock that has a lot of clay in it. But there are actually 2 exceptions to the clay in the sedimentary group family of deposits, and that's Rhyolite Ridge and Jadar in Serbia. And the thing that differentiates them is they're both lithium and boron deposits, and they're actually quite low in clay. So they have different mineralogy, but they are still found in the sedimentary rocks. And that different mineralogy has major impacts on how you process and extract the lithium.
One of those, I'm assuming, but I could be wrong, it's sedimentary rocks are more porous, they're softer, so you don't have to use as much energy. Would that be right?
Yes, that's very true. So, and in 2 places, you don't have to use as much energy. You don't have to use as much energy to actually, dig them up and crush them, because, as you say, they're softer rocks. But actually, more significantly, how do you get the lithium out of the mineral that's where it's and the boron in our case out of the mineral they sit in? We can use a very straightforward technology that's been in use for more than 100 years in the copper industry, which is just acid leach. So no high temperatures, no high pressures, just crush the rock to about 20 millimeters or 3/4 of an inch, and put it into a mix of water and sulfuric acid, and we leach it out. So it's very low energy intensity. And actually, all of our energy, in our case of Rhyolite Ridge, comes from the making of that sulfuric acid, which we do on site. Now, in comparison, the spodumene deposits, which are found in these pegmatites, they're hard rock, so they're more energy intensive, mining them and crushing them and grinding them down. But getting the lithium out of the mineral spodumene is also very energy intensive, and you have to roast it, so take it up to a high temperature around about 1,000 degrees. Celsius to get the lithium out. So we don't have to do that. So yes, they're much less energy intensive when compared to spodumene or pegmatite type deposits of lithium.
You had some results come out a couple of weeks ago. These acid leach test results came out. Was that above expectations, pretty much what you expected? Can you just give us a bit of an overview of, was that good news or bad news?
Yeah, no, sure. I'm happy to do that. So, I've already mentioned, we've been working on this project for quite some time, and we finished a feasibility study back in 2020. Now, what all of our work from 2016 through to 2020 was focused on was where we had high lithium and high boron together in the rock. Mm-hmm. And so we call that our high boron ore. And we recovered both the lithium and the boron. And we have about 150, a bit over 150 million tonnes of that material. That's what our feasibility study was based on, mining about 64 of it, so less than half of it. But that's what our feasibility study and our economics were then based on. Now, and from that, we would mine around 2.5 million tonnes a year. So the mining rate is not high, particularly for when you have 150 million tonnes of resource. And from that 2.5 million tonnes a year, we would extract and produce 22,000 tonnes of lithium chemicals, lithium carbonate, and 174,000 tonnes of boric acid. Okay, so that's very much the way, that's been our main focus for the last 6-7 years. These latest Leach results, what we were doing was we're saying, okay, there's other lithium mineralization in this deposit, we've known about it, and let's go and examine that and do more test work on it to see how we can extract the lithium from that. And what we found and were very surprised by was that there's another type of mineralization that's actually low in boron, but importantly low in clay, that we can actually leach in a fairly similar way. And so we can use all these learnings and the more than $100 million that we've spent on this project to date. We can use those learnings and apply it to extracting the lithium from this other type of mineralization that sits in our resource estimate, but does not and has never been included in any of the mine plan or feasibility or economic analysis. And so how we now describe the deposit is there are 3 types of mineralization at Rhyolite Ridge. There's a lithium and boron, which I said is the project is based on today. Then there's this low boron lithium mineralization which we can leach in a similar way. And the other type, which we call type 2, is a lithium clay. So there is lithium clay at Rhyolite Ridge, and it's a very separate sort of layer that sits on top of the other type of mineralization. But collectively, you've got 3 types of mineralization, and we're confident, particularly with the 2 acid leach types of the high and low boron, that we can process them in a fairly similar manner. The clay will require very different looking processing flow sheet, and we are still sort of parking that for the time being. But the other 2, we're full steam ahead on.
So if I get this right, the clays are a little bit more complex. So
yes,
let's put that to one side, but that wasn't in the DFS in 2020 anyway. Neither was the low boron.
That's correct.
That wasn't in the DFS either.
Yes.
So that's just additional. So the fact that the clay is a little bit more difficult, you can pop that to one side. It doesn't really affect going forward into I guess production in 2026. Would I be right?
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly correct. And one last thing I'd perhaps add to that is that of each of those 3 types, they are layers, and they are stacked one on top of the other. Okay, and roughly there's a bit over 1 million tonnes, or a bit less than 1 million tonnes, but close to 1 million of contained lithium carbonate in each of them. By coincidence, they're almost evenly sort of distributed across the 3. So we have a total of 3.4 million tonnes of contained lithium carbonate in our resource.
Okay.
And remember, we're talking about producing 22,000 a year. So that would go for well over 100 years if you were to mine everything, okay? But it's resource. It's not yet in a mining reserve. So I just want to make that clear. But there's a lot of lithium in this deposit, and it's still open, and it's going to get bigger in the future. But you are exactly right. This other material was never included in any of the economics of the project, and it's not going to impact when we start construction. It's not going to change the design of our flow sheet. That's already all set in place for processing of the high lithium, high boron mineralization. So this is all growth, future growth is what we're really talking about.
That's what I was about to say. So, you know, given that DFS, and going back to that DFS, it was done, I'm talking to you in, we're October 23, crazy. That was done 3 years ago. What was the price? What did you base that DFS, the lithium price on at that time? Because the lithium price, by the way, we all remember it's pretty crazy. It goes up to 70 and it comes back. It's all over the shop at the moment. Does that affect you? What's your price then?
Yeah, it has been very volatile, and that goes all the way back to 2016 when we started on this project. There's been, you know, a lot of volatility. So when we finished the feasibility study in 2020, we were using $11,000 per tonne for lithium carbonate.
All
so
right.
It's a lot, you know, it's a lot. Our 11,000 is a lot lower than it's been ever since 2020.
So I guess what I'm looking at is the economics will still stack up even if the lithium price pulls back a little bit further. The economics of the project stack up. Number one. Number two, do you need, because you talked about permits a moment ago, and these stackable and adding to that, does that mean you've got to do another permit, or does it fall under the same remit because they're stacked?
Yes, so that's a very good question. So they are all contained within the same permitted area, and the footprint, or you know, the physical footprint of what you're permitting is very important. And so these all fall within the same permitted area, and they also fall within the same mine plan. So that they are effectively covered. When we permit one, we permit all three. And you know, there will be some modifications if we were to expand that, and you know, increase production. Of course, there will be some modifications and amendments to certain permits, but we won't have to go and re-permit or anything like that. So, you know, yes, that's something that makes this really attractive. Is that here we have, you know, more than 100 million tons of material that contains more than 1 million tons of contained lithium carbonate, and it's already been going through the permitting process, just like we've been doing for the main type 1 mineral ore.
Bernard, let's talk economics a little bit at the moment, because our audience are, you know, investors. They're looking at opportunities. The lithium space, quite frankly, can be confusing. Now, I think you've given us one idea, which is the fact that this is a sedimentary deposit. There's only 2 in the world. Yours is one of them, which means lower energy. So I guess that sets you apart from some of the other ones. But I want to know, your share price has been under a little bit of pressure. Others have as well. But I just want to find out what the challenges are, where you see the opportunity for people out there. This is not financial advice, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Go do your own research as well, or pick up the phone and speak to Bernard. But really, I just want to find out where the opportunity lies, I guess, and what makes you different, not just the sedimentary deposit, lower energy costs, but people get confused with what they like lithium, but they're a little bit nervous at the moment.
Yes, sure. Again, it's a very good question. So, you know, firstly, you're right that sedimentary deposits are different. You know, there is no sedimentary deposit that's in production for lithium anywhere in the world today. Okay. And so, you know, that understandably, that's seen as a risk. It's different than the conventional sources of lithium, and that, of course, presents a risk. But we recognise that, of course, you know, 6-7 years ago. And, you know, that's why we've done more than $100 million of work, test work, leaching work, many hundreds of leach tests. We've run a full simulation pilot plant. This plant behind me is actually the detailed engineering design, three-dimensional model. Crazy. Yeah, it's very impressive. And one day you'll have to walk through it because you can three-dimensionally. So we've invested a huge amount to de-risk that element of this deposit, and that was very, very important strategy of ours right from the word go. So we think we've addressed that risk of, this hasn't been done before. Now, importantly, when I say it hasn't been done before, the other important point here with our deposit is it hasn't been done before in lithium, but our processing plant from start to finish doesn't have any new technology in it at all. All of it is commercially proven technology that's been in use in many mines around the world for many years. So the acid leaching, we're really just using the same technology that's been used for 100 years in the copper mining industry to acid leach this the lithium and boron from the ore. And then the back end, the more chemical processing part of it, is actually, again, standard technology that's been used for a long time. So it's more about applying it to a lithium deposit. That's what's not been done before. It's not that any of this technology is commercially unproven. All of it is commercially proven. So that's a really important point, I think, when you talk about conventional versus unconventional. I think that a couple of other things that set Rhyolite Ridge apart are its location. It's in the United States, the second largest vehicle market in the world. Obviously, there's a huge emphasis at the moment to look at supply chain security, and we're right in the centre of all of that discussion. And how can I say that? Well, I talk regularly to many groups within the government in DC. We're often there, and part of that is that we applied for and were the first time a mining project has received a sizable loan commitment from the US Department of Energy to the tune of $700 million conditional commitment. So yeah, this project is right in the heart of all of that debate around addressing supply chain security, and importantly, it's not just about digging up the raw material; it's about making lithium chemicals. And
That's
as again you can see behind me, this is a lithium chemical processing plant. It's not just a mine, and we're going to crush rock and concentrate it and send it off somewhere else. No, we will make 98% pure lithium carbonate and above at the site, and that's what will go out through the mine gate. And that specifically is what that loan is about. It's not about mining; it's about chemical processing to address the holistically the security of supply chain question.
How many other companies in the lithium space are doing that sort of that I guess upscale, if you like, to the chemical processing? Because that's where I guess what's the word I'm looking for? That's where it gets a bit complicated. A lot of them are digging up the lithium, sending it off. The majority of it goes to China for that that chemical processing. But you're saying we're doing it at the mine gate, and we send out the lithium carbonate. How many other companies out there are doing what you're doing? Do you know the answer to that?
I don't know the exact number of companies, but what I can say is that 60% of the world's lithium comes from spodumene, and there are no spodumene mines that have an integrated chemical processing plant at the mine site. None. There are several chemical processing plants that convert spodumene into lithium that have been constructed or are in construction in Australia, but none others in the world. So it's very, very rare to be making the lithium chemicals at the site. Now, the lithium brines, that's a different story, because they do make the lithium chemicals at the site, at least in one form or another. So, for example, Orocobre, which is now part of Allchem, which incidentally the chairman of Ioneer, James Callaway, was the chairman of Orocobre, and took that project from really grassroots or first development through to commercial production. They did make and still do make a chemical lithium carbonate technical grade at the site. So it's a bit easier in the brine area, and it is done there. But as I said, 60% of the world's lithium today comes from spodumene or thereabouts, and none of that is made into chemicals at mine sites like this. And so I think if you're going to, and the US, I think government recognises this very much so, and that if you're going to address the security of supply chain, you can't just address the raw mineral production. You have to address the downstream chemical processing as well, and our project does that.
Okay, we are running out of time, but I've got a couple more things to ask you. The Benchmark recently, I think, put something out which said there'll be 100,000 tons of lithium produced by 2025.
In the United States, yes.
In the US. Was that referring to you guys? When are you getting into production? I mean, is it right, that number?
Well, I don't think it's going to be achieved in 2025. That was the projection. That's correct. And it was a bit over 100,000 for domestic production of lithium in the United States. So no, I think that we're going to be very, very, very far short of that. Our first production will be 2026. And I think there's only maybe one or two other projects that will be in production around a similar time. So no, I don't think we'll get anywhere near 100,000 by 2025. And just to put that number into context, by the way, the US is predicted to need 1 million tons of lithium chemicals by the end of this decade.
Holy moly!
And today it produces domestic production. I'm talking about 5,000 tons. So it's going to go from there's 5,000 tons of production today, and they're going to need 1 million tons. Second largest motor vehicle fleet in the world is going to need 1 million tons or thereabouts by the end of this decade. Now, of course, it's going to be impossible for that to be all domestically produced, but I'm sure that they are committed to a portion of it to be domestic and to, of course, address security of supply chain for such a fundamental material necessary for electrification of transportation.
Okay, Bernard, I'm getting where you're coming from. I'm getting that there doesn't seem to be too many impediments for you to go forward. You've got Department of Energy funding. You've got Sibanye-Stillwater are also doing some funding. They're a partner. I think you've got a lot of very loyal shareholders. What I want to know, why are you in the boring part that no one's taking notice? Because some companies out there seem to be market darlings. I'm sorry to say this to you, Bernard, but you don't seem to be a market darling at the moment, but you seem to be doing all the right steps. Could you explain to our audience where that's coming from? What's your view on the pressure on the share price?
Yeah, I think there's a number of reasons for it, but certainly one is that we are in the boring period, which I think is an accurate description, and that is that period as you lead up to commencement of construction. And unfortunately, that is a period where you do not generate a lot of news flow. You're going through permitting, you're finishing your detailed engineering, you're getting everything prepared so that you can be ready to commence construction. And that's what we've been doing, particularly in the last 12 months. And you're going to see more evidence of that in the coming months. We're looking at long lead time items. We're partnering with Caterpillar. We have had a partnership and still have a partnership with Caterpillar to get ready. They're going to supply our trucks. We've ordered some pumps through them and other things. And so, it is boring, but it's necessary. There's no way that you can then be ready to commence construction if you don't do that. And it is a period where you have limited news flow, unfortunately. And we are, trying to address that through the growth work that we're doing. And I should point out, by the way, that the growth work was not just something that we, one day woke up and thought, we need to do some of this. It was actually a strategy of ours that had been in place for a long time to do it at the right time. But it was also very much the catalyst for it to kick it off was the inbounds that we were getting because of how advanced our project is, and so people that were wanting, including our offtake partners that were wanting to purchase more lithium from us than the 22,000 that we will initially produce, they were a significant catalyst for us, moving quickly ahead with the growth work that we've been doing. Coming back to your question though about the share price. So I think there is that sort of boring period. I think you do have, of course, there's many other factors, and overlaying them is the fact that the lithium price has come from above $70,000, less than 12 months ago, down to, into the mid to high 20,000. So it's been a significant fall, but coming back to your earlier question, we used $11,000 in our feasibility study. So we're still very, very comfortable at today's prices, and it's going to continue to be volatile. That's just the nature of this business, particularly in lithium, as you get sort of mismatch between supply and demand, and the mismatches are going to be on both sides of the equation, and that's going to mean price spikes and price falls, and that's just the nature of it. And that's where our boron comes in. It's the exact opposite to the lithium. So we have, a third largest boron producer in the world is where we will be in production at 170,000 tonnes. That's a significant contributor, like 30 to 40% of our revenue, or 30%, because depending on price assumptions, but 30% of the revenue will come from boron. And it's a very, very stable business, very long-term stable, both demand and also hence pricing. So it's a good balance. So I think they're the key things.
All right, I've got one last. Oh, sorry, Bernard, because we are running out of time. I've got one last thing. Permits. You've got two out of three ain't bad, but you've got to get the third.
Yes.
What's your thought process on that? Are you comfortable? Is that a challenge?
No, we're very comfortable on the permitting process. So you're right, we have 2 out of 3. We're working on the last one. That's the federal permit, which is called the Mine Plan of Operation. It goes through a sort of a roughly 12-month process, or generally it takes longer than 12 months, but in our case, they committed to sort of trying to do it within 12 months. That's called the NEPA process, and we're sort of roughly halfway through that. And no, it's going extremely well. We're pleased with it. A little bit behind on the draft EIS. The government had said that they expected to have that out by the end of September, but we haven't seen it. But, I can assure you and listeners that we are working very closely with the BLM and the Fish and Wildlife just to make sure that's finished off and out there for public comment as quickly and soon as possible. There's been no red flags on our side that we've seen, and so we're comfortable with the way the process is working. We've done a lot of work in this area over the last 3-4 years, a lot of preparation, and we're going through the process. So we are expecting to have that final, what's called a record of decision, in the early part of next year. And once we have that, then we can just finalise what we need to do with Sibanye and the Department of Energy, and we'll be ready to commence construction. And that's going to be exciting. So I'll bring him back on. Bernard, give me 3. I love to wrap this up like a little Tiffany box and go give our beautiful audience out there 3 reasons why you think right now is a pretty good time for Ioneer and people to take a look at you. We're very cheap for a start, with the share price coming off like it has, which you've alluded to. We're well funded, with $50 million in the bank at the end of the last quarter. We have the DOE $700 million loan commitment and the Sibanye joint venture equity commitment of just under $500 million. So we're substantially funded. We're working through the final stages of this permitting process. We're confident that we'll have those permits and we can commence construction once we do. And we're going to be in production in 2026 is our plan. And in 2026, producing 22,000 tonnes a year, that will quadruple US lithium production. And as I mentioned before, it'll mean that we are the cornerstone of this domestic lithium production in the most important lithium market in the world. I think you might get a Christmas card from the president, ladies and gentlemen. Bernard, great to chat to you. Sorry, we've run out of time, but let's come back and give us an update before the end of the year. But for now, thanks so much for joining me on Making Money Matter. Thank you, Kerry. Pleasure.